Hello, folks. Episode 5 of the Because I'm Carlos podcast. And we've got ourselves a fun little topic this time around. And we've got a couple of examples that we got to discuss a little bit recently on the live stream as well as through various media outlets, kind of following up on the alt, security breach, if you will, with their Chrome extension or their browser extension, I should say, as well as Panini's LeMelo gate. Rather than kind of go into a deep dive individually on them, I did think that the two of them together this past week make a good combination to just have a general discussion on a simpler topic. And what it really comes down to, and I guess the title that I'll use probably for this one would be something along the lines of trust in the hobby. What is the importance of trust in the hobby and kind of how this can be, it's a very delicate thing. And you have to be very careful with it because it is something that can be easily lost. So it is something you want to kind of keep an eye out if you're one of the companies that are operating in the hobby space, really in any aspect of life, but in the hobby space especially, since a lot of it is really based on consumer confidence. And that could be a deeper topic for another day. But just to keep it simple and high level, using these two examples, just to give you a little background, Alt, the part of the reason they were in the news this past week is that they had a browser extension and the CardPorn Instagram channel, Instagram page, I should say, basically kind of pulled the curtain back on some of the code involved in the browser extension. And inside of it, they were able to determine that it had a couple of lines of code that would take the browser extension, which was designed and it was advertised and promoted as a free way to be able to see eBay results in terms of best buy it nows and things like that, basically give you some eBay data, which some other sites already kind of do. There's the paid data platforms like a Market Movers or Card Ladder, but there's also 130 Point, there's also Sell the Peak, there's also a variety of different sites that you can go to that give you similar type information. Well, the idea was this browser extension would allow you to be able to do that while you're already on the site, be able to see the information, a little extra data that eBay doesn't make easily available to you. Even though they now have a few avenues to which to do, other than the sites I gave you, eBay themselves has their own collection beta, which is another point of discussion for a later time. But they're giving a little bit more information behind the curtain that they had previously, covered up a little bit. But this browser extension was supposed to help you with that, and of course, being free, it was being offered as this, service to the community, so to speak. But one of the funny things, we can never have nice things. Once you take a look at the code, it goes beyond the point of taking information like that. It also starts kind of capturing information from everything you're doing on your eBay page. And that covers, conversations, that covers your own kind of data. And one of the things that isn't really established here is, well, what are you going to do with that data? Alt's response was basically something to the effect of, it's to improve customer experience. But one of the problems is that while you can have terms of service, and I want to kind of lead off with that a little bit because there are some folks that immediately jump out to defend, and they basically say, it's covered under the terms of service, and there's other, platforms that use similar kind of data, and I'll use Instagram as an example since that's a favorite. Instagram, for those that are not aware, basically monitors certain types of things as well. A lot of different websites and applications follow you around the internet. That's the reason why when you're looking something up, you look up some product, you look up a lawnmower, and all of a sudden you're getting ads on Instagram for a lawnmower. It's not a coincidence that suddenly the system is so smart that it's able to determine and see things that you were just taking a quick peek at. But that's how you get followed around the internet. The fact, though, that it's commonplace doesn't mean that it's, carte blanche for companies to do that. And one of the key elements of this is the concept of consent. As long as it's abundantly clear what it is doing, you may be willing to accept it. Like folks that are using Instagram that are in the know and aware understand that, information is going to get tracked. Yes, I'm going to get targeted ads based on my previous web search history. That's all part and parcel of the thing. Instagram is owned by Facebook, who is notorious for this kind of thing too. But again, just because it exists out in the world and it is a common thing doesn't mean that you have carte blanche to be able to do that just because, we're following the crowd. That's a terrible excuse. And one of the other kind of points, and I'll get back to kind of the bigger problem, I guess I would say with the alts thing, because at the end of the day, trying to take your data, they're hardly the only ones who have ever tried to do that to that point. But the other issue that it creates is people who come out to defend it based on this idea. It's like, enough with the corporate defenders, so to speak, because realistically saying, there's other ones that do it the same, or there's other ones that do it worse, or this, that, and the other thing. Alt, in addition to its services, also is trying to get off the ground and trying to move people into using a vault platform. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the trust thing. If I can't trust you to be forthcoming with how you're going to try to use my data, or you're trying to encourage me to download an application from you that is going to, potentially take more of my information, and you're not going to be forthcoming and clear with that. And then kind of after the fact, once it was kind of discovered, they immediately did an about face and then removed that code very quickly. And their response was less an apology and more like, oh, well, we were trying to improve the user experience and, we've fixed the problem. Well, the problem is that there shouldn't have been a problem in the first place. And that's where that trust issue comes into play. And again, I mentioned to you that they're trying to also be a false service. Well, the vault service and that concept is 100% based on trust. Now, this is where those defenders come back in and they say, well, a lot of those vault services also have had kind of their questions and issues like a PWCC and things like that. And it's like, you're 100% right. They definitely have. Those who may have been around the internet at the time, hobby internet especially, may have seen I believe it was a video where DJ Ski was kind of in the PWCC vault and he was manhandling some slabs. And it's really, I don't recall if anybody ever figured out if those were his or if there was just somebody else's. But either way, if they're not his, that's problematic. Again, that's into the trust element. But the idea that some companies in the same space have also had their own trust issues doesn't excuse it for you. And the other piece from the alt portion of it that I want to kind of convey here is that alt is relatively new in the space. Yes, they've received some great funding and they've got a lot of money behind them, but they're not immune from questions kind of in their background and from their inception. The other aspect of it as well is since you're new in the space, you haven't earned the reputation or the equity to be allowed to be able to make a couple of mistakes and then be able to kind of lean back on your track record and say, you know what, we're sorry, we fixed it. Our track record in the community is established. We try not to do that, and it was a misstep on our part. But when you don't have that track record, you can't go back and say, oh, well, for the most part, we've been hitting the nail on the head. This was just a screw up for us. We made a misstep. You're not going to get the benefit of the doubt in the same way that a company that's been around for 10 or 15 years might be able to. So it's one of those things where a reputation takes a very long time to build up and a very short time to get damaged. But at the very end of this, after I talk about the Panini and LeMelo Gate thing, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the overarching concern that is as pertains to the whole trust aspect of it. Because as I said, trust is really hard to gain, and usually it takes a long time, but it's very easy to lose. And that's usually the problem with a lot of these things. Now let's briefly move on to the LeMelo Gate situation. And that really comes down to the idea of the National Treasures RPA. And of course, there's the element of it as pertains to the whole patch thing, which has also been a discussion point the last week or so about, patches that really have no association with, with a player, game worn or game used or even player worn or anything, and in a really expensive product. So that is an issue in and of itself, but it's kind of a side issue. The biggest portion of it was that the LeMelo ball autograph was then compared side by side with a Miles Bridges autograph. So again, you can look at the CardPorn's Instagram page for this, and it kind of brings into question, it's like, so did LeMelo actually sign it? And this is very similar for those who might be familiar with the whole question about Luka Doncic and whether his mother or someone else signed some of his autographs for him. The whole idea of the certified autograph thing is that it's supposed to be certified in the sense that your expectation is that if you pull one of these things in a pack, especially something that could potentially be as expensive as a LaMelo Ball RPA, especially in a product like National Treasures, which goes for a pretty penny per the box, your expectation is that you shouldn't be questioning the authenticity. And anything like that brings into doubt the authenticity of it is problematic at best and devastating at worst. And it goes back to that whole trust issue. Why would I trust you then, Panini in this case, as a manufacturer, if you cannot really certify to me that this autograph is legitimate? Again, people can then come back, and it's going to be very difficult to say because if the player and folks related to it say, oh yeah, it's 100% legitimate. But again, you don't have the representative there to be able to certify it because that was the way a lot of these certified autographs were done. You'd have a company representative who would be there, be present during the signing, witness the signing, and then basically take the cards back right away. That at least offered you a layer because then you can control the chain of custody as far as the cards are concerned and be able to say, look, I watched him sign these directly. I can at least say that for sure. And then I took them back with me and we brought them back to the factory to pack them into packs. That chain of custody becomes really important because then at least you have a way of tracing where it is. But in the current state where you send a player a stack of cards, maybe through an agent or maybe through an intermediary, from there, you have no idea whose hands were on it, who actually had a position to be able to sign it, whether it was in front of the player, was it signed all at once, or was it signed in a variety of sessions, again, assuming they did, and then what happened on the way back. And then, of course, the more people's hands get on it, the more potential there is to be damage and things like that as well. And a lot of that also can create delays and in turn, offer the possibility for redemptions. So there's a lot of, it's fraught with a lot of problems. But it really comes back to the whole idea of you're trying to create this value inside of these products that are increasingly expensive, but at the same time, by taking some of these shortcuts in order to avoid a redemption, you're creating the situation that now you have to question. Is this a real LaMelo Ball autograph? Is the RPA actually an RPA? Because it's not really a patch, but is it even the A in RPA? Any questions of that sort play back into that whole theme of trust that I said a moment ago with the alt thing. Alt does not have the track record to be breaching trust too much. So it's one of those things where going forward for them, it's going to be critically important what the next several steps are. They really are going to be kind of on a short leash to make sure that they don't misstep again. Now, one of the key elements that I want to kind of say, and this also applies to the Panini piece. Panini obviously has a longer track record. They've been around a little while, but they've also had their issues, no question. They have issues with kind of products like this, where is the value proposition even there? They have quality control issues. They also have issues with, changing around certain products. And that was part of a discussion this week as well, when kind of the idea, a lot of the background behind the new Select products were being shown, and the sheer quantity of parallels and things, and basically the enhanced print runs that pretty much proves are going to be the case. So are you really getting value anymore? Yes, you're going to be getting a lot of colored parallels, but if there's so many, are they really worth what they would have been in the past? And with increasing print runs, is that going to sustain the value of current version, but also previous iterations? Because as soon as it becomes known and feared that these are printed in way abundance, that's going to hurt the perception of the previous year's Select, even if the cards look really nice. And from a collector perspective, it also means that we've gone from being challenging to being basically impossible. And that's going to discourage some folks from chasing some of those parallels and trying to complete a rainbow that might no longer be possible to complete. And by may, I mean really, most likely for all but the most well-off, it's going to be impossible to complete. The sheer number of one-of-ones and various parallels possible make it borderline impossible. So that removes some of the appeal potentially. Now, bottom line, both of these stories are really examples of how a company can hurt its own reputation, but also how the element and the importance of trust is really a big part of how these things go forward. In the past on the YouTube channel, I've talked about possibly one of the biggest threatening things that the hobby may have, and I use the phrase the sword of Damocles for the hobby, is the trust factor in third-party grading, going back to that trust theme. But with these two examples here, trust really comes down to, if people cannot accept that Panini can get the job done as far as making sure that things are done properly, and again, some people already hate Panini for that and already don't trust them, which is fine, and I understand it. But if that becomes the general sentiment, then perception is reality, and of course that's going to hurt secondary market, and that's going to lower prices, and that's going to have a snowball effect that way. In a similar vein, though, alt is trying to enter itself and trying to be a part of that vaulting space. The whole vaulting concept could be its own video, its own discussion, and I may do that down the road here, but there is some practical utility to vaulting. It may be a situation where you may not be able to get the right insurance and things, and you may have some valuable cards. As these prices have escalated, you may develop pieces of your collection that are extremely valuable, and it may be worthwhile to you to have it in a safe storage place rather than a safety deposit box. In the same vein, have it in a vaulted area where they can take high resolution scans so that you can then at least look at your items without having to go visit them inside of a bank vault. Additionally, they may have the proper insurance and be able to then offer certain pieces of information that you can have so that you can keep it for your own records. In addition, if you decide down the road that you're going to sell something, well, then it's already potentially in a place. If you think of something like a PWCC, you can basically flip a switch and either make an auction on eBay, or if it's a high enough price item, you can use their premier auction service. Golden is going to have a vaulting service as well, something along those lines. And again, it has a link with an auction house, so it's an opportunity for you to be able to turn around and sell something if that's your desire. And one of the points that we made on the live stream really briefly, but it is a valid point. If you really think about the whole vaulting concept of sending cards somewhere where you can choose either to just keep it there or to be able to ship it off somewhere or to be able to sell it, well, ComC is really an example of a vaulting service as well, and they've got a much longer track record. They're hardly perfect, though, of course. I've had a lot of fun on the channel making fun of kind of their turnaround times in terms of shipping. But the reality is they've at least got a long-standing reputation in kind of that vaulting service kind of thing, because you can keep cards on there pretty much indefinitely if you wish. You can sell them on the platform if you wish. You can sell them on eBay if you wish. And previously you could send them off to go get them graded if you wish. Having those additional options, and they basically became like a post office box. So you could have eBay items and things shipped directly there and then vaulted, so to speak. But where alt is trying to enter into the space without the big long track record, missteps like that browser extension hurt their ability to be able to say, oh yeah, you can trust us. Well, as soon as you start breaching trust right away, it becomes increasingly difficult. All this leads me to my final point. And it applies to the Panini case and the alt case and anybody else in the hobby where you feel like your trust has been violated. You have to vote with your wallet. This is one of those situations where you have to do your due diligence. You have to look into it and understand if it makes sense for you, if it's right for you. And once you decide whether that's true or not, then from there you got to vote with your wallet. It's not enough to complain about it. It's not enough to just share it and yell it from the rooftops so everybody will listen. Of course, that's important because disclosure of these things is critical. Get the information out there. But at the same time, you do need to understand that these companies can only exist and do these things if you as the consumer accept them. You can't be the person complaining about, the ridiculousness of the LeMelo Ball potentially not signing his RPA if you in turn try to buy boxes of National Treasures, if you buy into breaks of National Treasures. If you participate at any level in buying the product, you are part of the problem that you're complaining about. So it's one of those things, you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, oh man, Alt did this. And then at the same time, it's like, I don't know if we can trust these vaulting companies, and then send your cars off to a vault. Again, I mentioned earlier, part of the reason I wanted to take a moment and make sure that I emphasize is that there is some potential utility for some people. For most collectors, none of this stuff is required. Most collectors aren't really in the price point that they're going to be interested in buying a lot of National Treasure stuff. They may pick up a single here or there, but for the most part, they're not concerned about the highest end of that food chain. But at the same time, when it comes to the vaulting thing, you may not have items in your collection that would be worthwhile for you to send off for vaulting. They may be perfectly fine in your room or on your shelf or wherever you keep your collection. And in that situation, none of this really concerns or matters to you. But the concept of trust still is the same. If you feel that a company in the hobby, regardless of what they are, have breached your trust to a manner in which you don't feel like you can do business with them, then you should exercise that right and not do business with them. To do so is basically to exacerbate and continue the problem, and then you are facilitating the continuation of that. At the end of the day, Alt is going to have to do their best to make amends if they want to continue to be relevant in the space. They're just getting themselves underway. Again, all this seed money could be all for naught if they cannot establish themselves to be trustworthy going forward, and that's going to require them to rebuild kind of the reputation step by step. What they do from here on in is going to be far more important than what they had done previous, because for them, this is kind of a forced reset. They don't really have a choice. They can't go straight from this and then just continue upward. They're going to have to kind of rebuild themselves, reestablish a foundation, and then try to move forward. In the same vein, well, Panini is always going to have its detractors because they have done things to be worthy of some detraction. But at the same time, it's just they're going to have to figure out a way to address this and maybe make sure that they've got some mechanisms in place to be able to say with more clarity and more definitively that when they offer a certified product, it is in fact certified and they're willing to stand behind it. So anyway, those are a couple of my thoughts here on this one. I'd love to hear any thoughts that you might have. So if you do catch this on the YouTube version of it, you can leave any thoughts in the comments regarding either the alt or the Panini piece, and any other ideas that you might have or for future episodes, or any other comments that you might have about the channel in general. My main hub is the Because I'm Carlos YouTube channel, but this one will also be put up on Anchor, so you can check out the audio version and you can check it through there. I don't know if there's any comment mechanism in there, but if you can do that, that would be great. If you're on the YouTube channel, if you could like the video if you like it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Either way, regardless of where you hear or see this, I will catch you in the next one.